Welcome you all to this 10th lecture on neutrons as probe of condensed matter. Before I continue with the technical part of the talk, I thought I will give you this bit of information. I would guess that some of you will like to do experiments using neutrons. So to do that, I just mention to you that for experiments at Dhruva at the moment, you may contact Head Solid State Physics Division of BIRC, which is Professor S.M. Yusuf. He will also be delivering you the lectures on magnetic neutron scattering. There is also an organization called UGC DAE CSR, which has got a center in Mumbai. This organization helps people. Once their proposals are accepted, you have to write a project. And once your project is accepted, you will get beam time at Dhruva and also support, travel and other support from the organization. This is it's a UGC organization. That's why it's called UGC DAE Scientific Coordination Center, Collaboration on Scientific Research. And if you want to do experiments abroad, even that is also possible. Apart from the fact that you can individually write to various sources, there is a spallation neutron source at Rutherford Appleton Laboratory by the name ISIS. Don't mix it up with the other ISIS. It's an ISIS. It's a spallation neutron source. And DST has a UK-India collaboration scheme on which you can apply for your beam time for a specific experiment. If it is accepted, if sanctioned, you can get travel and other helps for going to Rutherford Appleton Laboratory and carrying out these experiments. So I hope that at the end of this course, some of you will surely think about doing experiments using neutrons. So with that, let me continue with the talk. So this is on basics of neutron scattering. Last time in 9th lecture, I took you a round through the diffraction experiments available, in particular at Dhruva, but in general, the kind of diffraction experiment that you can do. So I went all the way from powder neutron diffraction, single crystal neutron diffraction, liquid and amorphous diffraction to diffraction using small angle neutron scattering and reflectometry using polarized neutrons. These are all, in general, I will club them under diffraction because these are basically structures at various length scales that you can see using these techniques. And now I will go into the most interesting part, one of the interesting part of neutron scattering, which is the strength of neutron scattering. It is inelastic neutron scattering. Inelastic means where till now we have been looking at structure at different length scales, but we are not looking at the dynamics in the system. As I told you earlier, that neutrons have energy typically milli-electron volt, maybe hundreds of milli-electron volt to few milli-electron volts to even micro-electron volt. This is quite comparable to the various processes going on in a solid, like phonons, diffusion, vibration of atoms and molecular structures. And that's why we can use neutron to pin these dynamics and understand them. So with that, go ahead. So this I showed you earlier, and I showed you a lot of experiments till now, which is on structures and in a range of structures. And I told you that these are slightly easier experiments because here you don't do any energy analysis for the scattered beam. And of course, for all these techniques, we can add the magnetic moment of neutrons, and it gives interesting answers, not only normal structures, but regarding magnetic structures. And this will be discussed in details in the next module. So now we have gone through this part. I will take your attention to the inelastic neutron scattering technique. So here we are talking about dynamics, and I will talk about dynamics with phonons, diffusion, which is a slower process, and the typical time scales are 10 to minus 12 seconds. And of course, you can even study very, very slow dynamics. But I mean, when I say very, very slow, with respect to phonons or other processes at nanosecond length scale using neutrons, but this I cannot discuss here. I'll be trying to show you some examples of dynamics using phonons and dynamics of phonons using neutrons, and also diffusion using neutrons. So this is the strength of neutrons, and and for this also, when you do slow dynamics, I will just so we can talk about microelectron volts, we can talk about milli-electron volts, and to some extent I can go to also vibrational spectroscopy up to 0.1 electron volt. So these are typical ranges, but I'll describe to you how we can do neutron inelastic scattering using an instrument known as triple axis spectrometer. So the triple axis spectrometer schematically looks somewhat like this. You have a collimated neutron beam. To understand why you need to collimate, because you want to define a K vector. But now this collimated neutron beam is falling on a monochromator. So this is a polychromatic beam. So this is a polychromatic beam cut down, and then it falls on the monochromator. So this is axis number 1. The monochromator can rotate and choose various energies from this beam. Then a monochromatic beam bumps and falls on the sample. Now, till now, the experiments we did was that the beam comes, falls on the sample. After that, you had a detector, either a position sensitive detector or a, we say, point detector, end on position. But now, so the sample forms the second axis in the spectrometer. Now, if I want to find out the energy of the outgoing neutron, then I need to do a Bragg diffraction of the outgoing neutron also. Because otherwise I don't know what is the energy of this. So there is a third arm in this known as an analyzer arm. And it uses the same principle as the monochromator. Monochromator and analyzer are same, a single crystal, but here this dictates the angle of diffraction. And now when you rotate the analyzer, you pick up various lambda from your scattered beam. Various lambda from the scattered beam. So now, till now, while doing structure work, we were not bothered about the energy, outgoing energy here. But now in this set of experiments, these kind of experiments, we have to find out the energy of the outgoing neutron. And now we know what is the lambda prime along with the K prime wavelength and momentum. This dictates K prime, but this analysis finds out what is the energy of the outgoing beam. And so there are 3 axes, that's why it's known as a triple axis spectrometer, triple axis. This is you can say the workhorse in most of the reactors. And B.N. Brockhaus actually was the first person to design this spectrometer and carry out inelastic scattering work using neutrons. He shared the Nobel Prize in 1994 along with Schall. So this is great innovation by Brockhaus. We also have a spectrometer, triple axis spectrometer at Dhruva, and I'll show you that shortly. So this is the triple axis spectrometer at Dhruva. Now, I will point out the axis to you. I told you earlier also, this is the monochromator drum. So at the center of it, the monochromator is there. So this is axis 1. Then the monochromatic beam comes here. Here is a sample. You can see there is a goniometer, because often you want to do phonons in a single crystal. How it looks like we will be knowing shortly. So this is the second axis. But now you see another collimator. This collimator is basically to reduce the background, takes you to the third axis. This is the analyzer. And after the analyzer, you have the detector here. And as a general knowledge, in all these kind of instruments, you will find there is this huge red drum. This is known as direct beam shielding. Because in reactors, all of us have to work. Personal safety is important, because the direct beam is coming here. So this direct beam catcher sits here, and it doesn't allow anybody walking here to get exposed. So this is the triple axis, axis 1, axis 2, and axis 3. So in this instrument, not only the direction of the outgoing neutron you find out, you also find out the energy of the neutron. So now it is E and K goes to another energy and another wave vector. Till now, when I said K to K prime in diffraction work, let me write it vectorially. In diffraction work, the magnitude of the vectors were same, only the direction changed. Now the direction and magnitude both have changed in this inelastic instrument, and we are arrangement to catch the outgoing energy in this spectrometer. So once I describe this to you, so you can keep changing in this instrument, because there's a monochromator drum, you can keep changing the incoming energy. So the incoming wave vector you can keep changing, and associated with that you have all the outgoing energies and outgoing wave vectors. So basically you can tag the omega and k space using this instrument. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with phonons. So let me show you the experimental result. Then that will make the things a little clearer to you. Let me draw it for you. Phonons are nothing but collective oscillation of the atoms and molecules in a frozen solid and in a crystalline solid. Non-crystalline solids don't have phonons, but of course they will have localized vibration. But here is a collective oscillation. So this collective oscillation of phonons, you are aware that they have their own dispersion relations. So if I draw omega versus k, you have these acoustic phonons, and you have two kinds of phonons, acoustic phonons. One is transverse acoustic, one is longitudinal acoustics. So when you have atoms, let us take this atoms kind A sitting here. So transverse acoustics are when the oscillations are in this direction and the wave propagates in this direction. They are normal to each other. They are transverse acoustics. And then you have this longitudinal acoustics when the atoms are like this and the oscillation is in this direction. The oscillations are in this direction, only different amplitude, and they are the longitudinal acoustics. These are just the counterpart of sound waves. When you are talking, we are creating this longitudinal acoustic waves, and of course, in the phonons are basically the higher energy counterpart of this longitudinal acoustic. That's why it's a longitudinal acoustic. The word acoustic comes, and when you go to k going to 0 or lambda tending to infinity, not really infinity, but our sounds that you can hear, then it becomes linear. Omega becomes linearly proportional to k. Otherwise, you have this dispersion relation, which most of the basic, the first few chapters of any condensed matter physics book tells that. And you also have acoustic, like acoustic phonons, you have optic phonons, which have dispersions like this. They're almost dispersionless because across the k vector they don't change much. And this comes from the word optic comes because if you have charged particles, their center of mass remaining same. This is movement against each other with the center of gravity remaining same. And if they are charged, they can absorb or they can connect with the optical waves, and that's why they are so transverse acoustics, and we have optical phonons. So these are the phonon dispersion relations which we need to we study using this technique. So you can see this omega is basically nothing but energy transfer in a scattering experiment. So your single crystal sample is aligned here, it scatters out, and then you have a analyzer which by rotating, that means you are changing this angle, you are scanning this omega space, and then you can adjust the angle and this angle to keep this wave vector transfer k or q, which I called, I'm sorry that I wrote k, q fixed. So what we do normally when you do these experiments, with a single crystal, we try to scan in this direction. So keeping the wave vector fixed, we scan in energy by rotating the analyzer crystal. And every time the energy transfer touches one of these dispersion lines, you will find a peak there, and you can mark a peak there, mark a peak here, mark a peak here. This is when you are using a single crystal, and we know the dispersion relations change with respect to the symmetry axis, and that is what are shown in the various because you know that the phonons, they are plotted in the first Brillouin zone, because a phonon wave vector q, if I translate it by a reciprocal lattice vector tau, it gives me the same phase and the same displacement. So you always, so this 0 and 1, this is the boundary of the first Brillouin zone. So we measure the phonons in various directions. So that's why you need this goniometer. So we need this goniometer. No. How do I do that? I can go back. This one is going back. Yes. So that's why I showed you there is a goniometer over here. This goniometer actually orient the crystal in such a way that one certain direction in Q is accessible to this horizontal system. You must have realized by now that because these are very heavy components, not just very heavy, our scattering plane is normally, it's a horizontal plane. It's a horizontal plane. So our entire experiment takes place in this horizontal plane. This is horizontal. And this detector moves horizontally. Here the monochromator drum rotates in along this axis, cylindrical axis, but the monochromator gives you beam out horizontally. So this goniometer, it allows me to bring a certain direction in plane and then study the phonon relationship in that direction. So these are the Q00 and 00Q directions. Another point I want to show you, you see this experiment, this data which I have shown here is from a sample called zircon. Together they have done molecular dynamic simulation as well as experiment using this sample. But most interestingly, you see these experiments have been done at Trombay, at ICIS, and also at Institut Laval-Langevin. So to get this dispersion relation, 3 neutron sources were used, and you can see that our Trombay experiments, because we don't have very high energy neutrons, are mostly here, close to the lower energy range. Whereas ICIS can go to higher energies, and so can Institut Laval-Langevin. And this blue line, these blue dots, they are actually obtained from the experiments at Institut Laval-Langevin, which is the most powerful reactor. Because we have less intensity, and also our high energy neutron part is not so intense. So here you can see the measurements have gone all the way up to 80 milli electron volts. So this at this 80 milli electron volts, you see that these experiments have been done at Laval-Langevin, and these are the fit curves obtained from molecular dynamics calculation. So this is an experimental data on the same instrument. If you are interested, some of you can do experiments for magnons. You are aware that magnons are the magnetic counterparts of phonons. If I may show you, our magnons basically will are basically the way it is shown, that a magnetic moment can rotate around the mean direction, which is this, and this tip has a different phase going from one side to another, the phonon like thing. This is the mean direction, so it keeps rotating with respect to the mean direction, and this is actually precessing around this, and this gives various modes of phonons, of magnons, sorry, not phonon, magnons. And these magnons can also be studied using this kind of triple axis arrangement. And sometimes in some systems, for example, some of the magnetic systems of interest, study of magnons proves to be the ultimate thing for understanding the dynamics in these systems and also various energy modes in the system. So you can use triple axis instrument for understanding magnons as well as phonons. I will now take you to another instrument. Here actually I will go a little more details into the theory. This is known as quasi-elastic neutron scattering. Now what is meant by quasi-elastic? So in neutron scattering, you can choose a neutron of certain energy, and that will have an energy transfer with various modes. Now, if this is the energy axis, if this is omega equal to 0, that means 0 energy transfer, you can have an inelastic process using a neutron of high energy. So it is like any other scattering, you can have an inelastic scattering at omega 1, let us say. And this omega 1 corresponds to some vibrational mode. So this is one way of doing, but these will be typically of the order of 100 milli electron volts or zero point 0.1 electron volts. So this is high energy transfer by Newton parlance. But imagine in a liquid, atoms and molecules, they are moving around. They are moving around, we can say, following Fickian diffusion. But this also has associated energy scales with it. But this energy scales are so small that you don't see any separate peak for this. But what you will see, if this is omega equal to 0, so omega equal to 0, this is the elastic line, elastic, but in reality, this omega equal to 0 is not really a sharp thing like this, but it's an elastic thing. This elastic peak is broadened by instrumental resolution. The quasi-elastic scattering coming from such diffusions basically just broadens this elastic line. So it is just close to omega equal to 0 in and around. So this quasi-elastic scattering is around omega equal to 0, and because it is very close to omega equal to 0, we don't call it inelastic, we call it quasi-elastic. Almost elastic, if I may translate it, quasi-elastic. And this can be studied using an instrument which I'll show you in a moment. So this is an instrument which is used heavily for understanding the motion, diffusion motion in various geometries of various organic, inorganic molecules. So here I'm showing you a monochromator which consists of two single crystals. So this one is the first crystal put in a direction of the beam, and then there's a second crystal parallel to it. So the beam is laterally displaced, then goes out. So this way, by rotating this system of monochromators and translating this one, I can choose various lambda in this instrument. This is the instrument over here. This part you don't see, this is inside the reactor beam hole. This is the place where the sample sits. Now, interestingly, now I need to understand the energy of the various beams which are coming from the sample. Because this is a quasi-elastic, and we need to know what are the energy of the beam. So here it is done, again using a trick and using something known as an analyzer crystal. This is an analyzer. Schematically, it looks like a large crystal, but basically, this is a combination of small blocks of pyrolytic graphites. Excuse me, like this, covering a large angle range. Now you see, a divergent beam comes out from the sample. Now the beam which is reflecting from this edge is at a higher angle, and the beam which is reflecting from this edge, it is at a lower angle. So now if I use this relation, the d-spacing for this is known. So when you go to large theta here, the energy is large. When you go to small theta, that means at this edge of the analyzer, you have got a energy coming out which is small. So in one go, I can scan from large energy to small energy using a analyzer and a large position sensitive detector combination. So this is basically, it analyzes the energy by using the Bragg scattering angle of the neutrons that is come out from the sample and then got reflected by the analyzer. Very simple principle, very efficient, and so this has been used by a group for many systems. I will take you a little bit towards something known as Fickian diffusion. We know that in liquids, atoms and molecules they undergo following Fick's law. This is the second Fick's law, and we know that in any medium, you have seen this. If you take a beaker of water, the simplest example will be if I take a beaker of water and drop some ink here. You can see that the blob is slowly spreading out with time, and after some time, the entire, if it is a blue ink blob, after some time the entire liquid becomes light blue. That's a very common experience for us. These are dilute colors many times. So this is what is shown in this, and here the movement is not ballistic. In a ballistic movement, we know the displacement x is directly proportional to time. We have done it since our school days. But here it's diffusion. That means there is a concentration gradient, so at any moment of time all the molecules are moving around in a zigzag course. But with this kind of movement, finally the ink molecule tries to equilibrate its concentration with the rest of the solvent and makes it equal. So, and this is followed by Fick's law. I will go ahead and oh, okay. I will use the palette. Somehow this has not come out properly. Let me write down. I have been discussing with you, if you remember, while discussing the correlation function, I talked about a correlation function g of RT equal to j prime delta R plus I'll take it later. R plus what does this tell me? First, it tells me that this delta function has a click when R is equal to Rj minus Rj prime t. It asks the question, if there is a, let us start with the atom. If an atom at t equal to 0 at the position j, then it gives me probability of another particle j prime at a position rj prime at a time t. Whenever this r equals this distance, I get a click. And this click I have to average over the whole ensemble, and what I get is a pair correlation function. Now, from here I showed you that if I talk about a particle self correlation at t equal to 0, it was a delta R function. Please look at my lectures earlier. But now if I talk about self-propagation, I will call this self of at R T, then this is equal to, now I need not do a sum over pair of particles, rather I am doing sum over only one particle. So it is delta R plus R0 minus RT. I am not, I can use bracket also, but it's basically, I'm trying to tell you that now, if this particle is there at origin at t equal to 0, where will it be at the time t? That gives me self-correlation function. So now this is self-correlation function. So as I told you earlier, when it comes to self-correlation function, then if you remember, we wrote down the sigma coherent. One was B average square, it was one term. Another one was delta J prime B square average minus B average square. One gave incoherent and other gave coherent. When it comes to self, then J is equal to J prime, and that means there is no correlation with others. So then the incoherent scattering cross section will come into play, even in case of dynamics. Because when J equal to J prime, this is 1, this coherent term goes away, what remains is the incoherent term. And what is the best incoherent scatterer? Hydrogen. So diffusion in hydrogenous liquids is very much favored by these quasi-elastic people, and where we study the self-correlation. Now, what is this self-correlation in a liquid? In a liquid medium, the diffusion is controlled by Fick's law. That I wrote. And what is the solution to the Fick's law? Solution to the Fick's law tells me G self RT is this. I am not trying to work it out for you, because then I will divert from neutron scattering, but this is the solution. Some of you may know. I can only tell you the physical significance. This is the self-correlation function. This is how a particle gets distributed in space in time. So this is nothing but a Gaussian function which has got the width 4dt. So if I plot it, suppose the particle is there. Every particle I can take it at an origin at any arbitrary time origin. If it is at origin at time t equal to 0, then as time goes, the particle keeps diffusing, its position keeps getting uncertain, and this gets uncertain by a Gaussian. And this Gaussian's width is 4dt according to this expression. So now that means as time goes to infinity, this Gaussian keeps getting broader and broader, and the particle gets distributed over the entire liquid. But that is what the solution of this Fickian diffusion tells you, that it is an exponential, it's a Gaussian distribution. If I take it one dimension, it will be x. In 3 dimension, it is r. Then this will be a particle starts from a point, starts getting distributed over spheres of larger and larger size, and the distribution is a Gaussian. It's very simple to understand the Fickian diffusion's solution of the Fick's law, and this is how it looks like. 2 power minus r square by 4 dt. So if I can measure this, but now you see, I have talked to you earlier also, I have to find out the scattering law to get the G of RT. So I am working from this space back to this space. All I am saying that if the particle follows Fickian diffusion, then this will be the law. With this much of introduction, let me go back to the transparency. So this was Fick's law. What I showed you, which did not come out here, and for self-correlation, the same particle correlated to itself. So that's particle, you have to go particle by particle, but it's the particle and its own position at a time t. So it is self-correlation. So there is no, so the incoherent scattering cross-section will be important here. So I will again have to write down. I'll write it down here. I'm sorry that somehow this has not worked. So basically, if I start with e to the power minus r square by 4 dt and do a Fourier transform of that, then I go to intermediate scattering law. You will remember, I request you to remember this. And then this intermediate scattering law is e to the power minus d q square t. Forget about some constants before and after. It's this, which is the intermediate scattering function. And if I do one more Fourier transform over this, I go to s of q omega, and this gives me so this gives me a Lorentzian in omega space with a half width at half maxima d q square h. So that means this is my as of q and omega. This is what I am measuring. Now I'll show you how true it is. So I will get the Lorentzian if some particle is diffusing following Fick's law, and the width of that Lorentzian is dq square h. Half width at half maxima is dq square h. So now, if that is the case, then let us look at the, you see. So this is a paper. This is not done in BRC. This is done at ICIS. So this is a methane diffusion in zeolite, but very similar work has been done in many places, including the instrument over here. Now you see, this is what I was trying to bring you to. You see this, look at this distribution. This has got an elastic part in the central part, and you have got a broad Lorentzian. You see, this is the Lorentzian. I'll write L for it. This is the Lorentzian, L for it. And this has been done at various angles. So that's why they have mentioned the Q. They have mentioned the Q. At which angle they have measured this Lorentzian. So the sample is a zeolite. People in chemistry will know zeolite is actually structure which is heavily used in basically in coal cracking. I think oil cracking. Oil cracking it's used. It's a catalyst, but basically it's a structure with, so there are a structure with lots of open pores, and some molecules. So if you see a zeolite structure, there will be lots of pores, and some molecules can pass through the pores. Some molecules can't. So it's used basically to separate out molecules. And here, and that's why the diffusion of molecules in these zeolites is an important physical property they need to know. So this paper talks about how a CH4 molecule diffuses in a zeolite. So you see this, now this is a Lorentzian. They have done it at various angles, and they have done it at various temperatures. Now, interestingly, if I have a Lorentzian with a full width at half maxima, which is d q square h. You see, that means if I plot the full width at half maxima as a function of q square, the slope will tell me dh. It's a straight line. And then from there I can find out the diffusion constant. See, look at these plots now. So they have taken the data at a large number of q values, that means a large number of angles, plotted the full width at half maxima, and you see they have plotted the straight line which gives me the diffusion constant. So in a quasi-elastic experiment, by fitting these Lorentzians, you get this information about the diffusion constant. And this diffusion constant is very small. It is typically in the range of 10 to the minus 12 seconds. Not as fast as phonons, which are at 10 to the minus 15 seconds. So here, in this article, it has been found, they have found out the diffusion constant at various temperatures, and you can see at least one thing is apparent from here: 300, 360, 330, 400 slope is increasing. It is becoming more and more. Why? Because as you go to higher and higher temperature, the methane is diffusing faster, diffusion constant is going up, and that's it. So next step, maybe you can start looking at diffusion constant as a function of temperature. I'm not getting into that, but you can see. So this is how a Fickian diffusion in real space translates into a Lorentzian, but one issue is there, that this, I assume, a Fickian diffusion. In a Fickian diffusion, it follows a Lorentzian. If it is a non-Lorentzian, if there are deviations from Lorentzian, then I can also say, at least I can say that, okay, this diffusion is non-Fickian, and instead of dq square, possible that it is following some other power of q. So that is now for the researcher to find out. And for one of you, if you are interested in looking at diffusion of atom or molecules in a porous medium, you can go to quasi-elastic neutron scattering and you can work on this. So this is all I wanted to tell you about the diffusion and dynamics using inelastic neutron scattering. So let me just repeat. So I first I talked to you about the triplex spectrometer, which is a workhorse, which is required to understand phonons. Then I went ahead. I explained to you the I showed you how a phonon measurement from a single crystal looks like, and then I discussed with you an instrument in Dhruva which actually studies quasi-elastic neutron scattering, and I told you that a quasi-elastic scattering means nearly elastic, or basically it's a broadening of the elastic peak. I must give you some numbers. So like in this instrument, the instrument that I showed you, the typical width goes to about 200 micro electron volts. But there are instruments where, in ILL Grenoble, you can talk in terms of resolution of 20 micro electron volts to few micro electron volts. Such small energy transfer means you can go to even slower dynamics to understand them, because when the resolution is very, very, very narrow, when the resolution is narrow, then you can see very slight broadening around that peak. Also, I didn't have an opportunity to discuss with you an instrument which is known as spin echo instrument, where you can go to much slower dynamics, but it is just for the information that there is something called a spin echo instrument. Our time does not permit us now to get into the details of this for even slower dynamics. So this brings me to the end of my discussion regarding primarily reactor based elastic and inelastic neutron scattering techniques in this lecture. I have given you in reasonable details regarding Ficke and diffusion. Next, I wanted to bring your attention to another part of this course, because today, apart from reactors, pulse sources and time of flight spectroscopy is important, and it is not possible for me to give you very detailed analysis of time of flight spectroscopy, but I want to introduce you to time of flight spectroscopy. As the name suggests, the time of flight is literally deals with the flight time of a neutron. Unlike photons, neutrons move much slowly. So really how long it takes to go from one place. Basically, if I know I have started a clock at time t equal to 0, and I have a neutron detector here, and I have detected the neutron at time t, then from this time of flight, I can find out energy of the neutron, velocity of the neutron, and wavelength of the neutron. It is as simple as that. Now, is it possible to do it in reactor? What is the problem? The problem is that a reactor is a continuous source. So there is no clock in a reactor. Continuous neutron beam is coming out from the reactor, and that's why all the reactors, usually they will use a monochromatic neutron beam, as I showed you, which is collimated well. Wavelength is known, so we know the lambda and k, and you do the angle dispersive experiments for structure as well as for dynamics. It is possible to do TOF in a reactor, not impossible, but in that case you have to chop the beam. Why chop? Because the source is continuous. I want to make it pulse. So what can be done? I can have a cylinder. So in the beam path, I can put a strong absorber cylinder like this, maybe one and another one. This place at a certain distance.